All right. This I'm not going to have any news article for. This is just from my own thoughts that I wrote down into some notes. Okay. So, the Supreme Court ruling. I was not happy with my thoughts on this, at least how poorly organized they were last time. So I've come back. I have some notes about what all I think about it. A few days ago, on actually the last day of that the Supreme Court was in session, they decided that Trump is above the law, and so is Joe Biden. The ruling is as bad as you think and worse. In fact, there's going to be like three parts to this. I want to separate this roughly into three parts and then some ending thoughts. First up is the ruling itself. As I said, it is just as bad as you think it is and worse. Like, there is no amount of fear mongering that could adequately express the disastrous nature of this Supreme Court ruling. Fully, the office of the U.S. president is now just above the law. That is like not even an interpretation. That is the textual content of the ruling. That the office of the president for any official act is immune to prosecution. And of course, like the most obvious thing to draw from this is that this is like very obviously lays the groundwork for authoritarian dictatorship. Like very, very easily, not even a question. Anybody who argues that like, oh no, there's still limits on the presidency is fucking coping, and they're like liberal, and I do not respect their political opinions. Um, you know. But anyways, so yes, the ground being laid very solidly for an authoritarian dictatorship, and like unquestionably so, right? And it won't just be assassinations either. The thing that everybody rightly focused on was the president potentially assassinating political opponents, having like dissidents killed and stuff. But that's not the only consequence that's going to come of this kind of ruling if slash when Trump wins the presidency, which I think he's unfortunately quite likely to, right? So in addition to that, in addition to the assassination of political dissidents, right? You're gonna have like full fascistic control over the Supreme Court and the executive branch. And the executive branch presides over a lot of things. They preside over regulations, archives, and history, and education too. You better fucking believe that a fascist United States is going to be heavily, heavily involved in pushing Christian nationalist narratives and talking points in schools and blatantly rewriting history in ludicrous ways to like support a fascist narrative. The Republicans have already been doing this at the local level with like book bans and shit. And, you know, the Democrats weren't exactly stopping them. In some places they were, in some places they weren't. It's going to get so much worse, which is horrible for like, well, it's horrible for just mental health outcomes of kids across the board, but it also is disproportionately going to impact queer kids, especially queer kids who grew up in religious and very conservative upbringings, because there's almost a 1-to-1 of conservative family with a queer kid and an abusive family. Like that's almost a 1-to-1 relationship. It's almost like, and this is going to enable that, in fact, you know. And of course, kiss any two-state solution goodbye too. Another issue that this impacts is Israel and Palestine. Israel and America are going to be bosom buddies more so than ever once the Republicans take power, because, you know, fascist states love other fascist states, and Israel's a fascist state. And if America becomes one, then like, never mind the like sliver of hope that we get sometimes that maybe something is possible in the Israel-Palestine conflict. We're not going to get anything, you know? God, I hate mirror mode so much. Okay, well, look. Anyways, where was I? Education. fascist narratives and history and whatever. Okay, yeah. That's gonna be a horrible result of this ruling, is that the executive branch is gonna have carte blanche to fucking push all of that, right? Oh, now I get a mushroom. Thank you, when I don't need one. And, yeah, the two-state solution as well. Look, literally everything that the executive branch has the power to touch via the president, so everything, will get much worse in record time because Republicans have a concerted roadmap for it. And the ruling from the Supreme Court that the president is above the law is the green light to just go ahead with Project 2025, gut the administrative state, fucking fire all the federal employees that aren't hardcore fascist loyalists, and basically just start the crackdowns and the revisionism and the, like, expansion of fascist influence abroad and shit like that. Like, literally, this ruling is going to make China a preferable geopolitical alternative to America, which is not something I thought I would see in my lifetime. I mean, I didn't exactly think I wouldn't see it, but I didn't think I would, if that makes sense. Anyways, look, that's just part one. That's how bad the ruling itself is going to be. Now let's get to part two, which is Joe Biden's reaction to it, and the Democrats' reaction, I guess. Or I guess, no, that'll be more in the next one. Like, this is just Biden specifically. So, this essentially confirmed that America is in the sunset days of the Weimar Republic, so to speak. So, what did Joe Biden say in response to this? Fucking nothing. He, like, went on stage for 4 minutes. The speech that he gave was less than 5 minutes cumulatively. And like, this was supposedly about a Supreme Court ruling, something that has consequences so massive that, like, it's going to fuck up the country for generations. And he dedicated less than 5 minutes of airtime to it. Jesus Christ. And of course, when he went up there, all he did was ramble about Trump and how you should vote for the Democrats in November. Literally, like, went up there to supposedly talk about a Supreme Court ruling and didn't mention the Supreme Court's role in this a single time. Ooh, it was infuriating. And this is part of the problem with liberalism too. This is a product of Joe Biden being ideologically liberal, right? That, like, he's incapable of offering any critique of liberal institutions because in the mind of the liberal, institutions are flawless. And of course, it wouldn't be very civil of him to be mean to Clarence Thomas, the most Hitlerite black man in America. So where was I? Biden saying nothing in his speech. Yes, sunset days of the Weimar Republic. Biden doesn't care enough to say anything meaningful. And of course, knowing full well that he is now a god king above the law, he expressly promised not to exercise that power. Joe Biden literally went up there and said, "It is a sad day in America. This ruling will embolden Trump, blah, blah." The ruling put the president above the law, not Trump specifically. You can use that power too, motherfucker. And he literally promised not to do anything. I fucking hate liberals so much. It doesn't help that Joe Biden is a husk of a man, but like this is the typical behavior that's expected of any liberal. This is like, I could have told you this. Because liberals are the system. They don't think anything can fundamentally change about the system because of, like, the end of history brainworms and whatever. They would literally rather lose to fascism, let the country succumb to fascism, than lift a single finger to criticize liberal institutions, because that's their lifeblood. Liberals only care about institutions. They don't care about democracy. They don't care about the people. They don't care about the bully pulpit. They don't care about the media. They only care about the fucking unchanging nature of institution. And paradoxically, that leads them not to guard them, because they think that they are so immutable in their immovability that, like, that they do not need guarding. That is preposterous to think that they could ever change. And that's why they ostracize progressives so hard. This is why, fundamentally, like, the attitude that leads people like Joe Biden to never mention the Supreme Court in a ruling that came from the Supreme Court is like the same thing that leads Democrats to only ever come alive when they are fighting against progressives within their own party, because fundamentally the thing that they oppose is only change. Like the Democrats don't necessarily oppose fascism. They do oppose socialism because socialism necessitates things changing. Fascism doesn't, not all that much at least. It's possible to transition from a more democratic form of government to a fascist form of government without any institutional overhaul happening. Like, this institutions can remain completely the same, more or less. However, for progressives, social democrats, and socialists, such change is necessary to bring about a better vision of the world, right? Like, these platforms are both like different political platforms in some way than the status quo. But liberals are more amenable to the fascist platform because it leaves institutions pretty much intact. Ooh. Okay. But that's my thoughts on how Joe Biden particularly responded to this. That kind of mixes a little bit with my thoughts on the liberal responses to this. But that's the next part that's coming up, and I'll do that when I have some breathing room here. Now on to the response from the liberal media outlets and the Democratic Party, right? That Joe Biden's just one guy. He's a very central figure, but he's just one guy. What about the rest of the sort of institutions that sort of exist on the Democratic side of things, right? The Democratic Party's reaction, unfortunately, has been pretty much the same. Like, Joe Biden's reaction was not that much different from the Democratic Party and liberal media's reaction to the Supreme Court ruling, which is infuriating because they refuse to project urgency at any point. Something in 2017 fucking killed their brain cells, right? I remember when even the more liberal leaning media outlets were sensationalist as fuck. CNN, NBC, they used to be Fox Newsing it up with the kind of spin they were putting on their stories. But now, like, over the course of the past few years, they've literally toned it down for the sake of toning it down because they realized, oh, our marching orders, more or less, are to be quiet and polite and civil. And being loud and passionate and argumentative is uncivil. That's Trumpian. That's very Trump-like. We don't want to be like Donald Trump because he represents everything wrong with America. Not in the sense that he's a fascistic wannabe dictator, but rather in the sense that he's not polite and that he's mean. Because fundamentally, those are the only things, even the Democrats, those are the only things that they oppose about Trump. They, like, if they had more of a problem with Trump's policymaking and his ideological underpinnings, then they would be doing more to combat him and the Republican Party at large and the Supreme Court, because there's clearly a project of institutional takeover here. But they're not willing to do that because they don't care. They don't see those as problems. So, for them, there's no problem. They don't feel the need to project urgency. Yeah, the liberals' response to the Supreme Court ruling on presidential immunity was beyond infuriating. Like, for shit's sake, there were liberal pundits saying, "Oh, this ruling isn't that bad. The president will still be subject to the law for unofficial act." And then when, like, it was a specific guy, I don't remember what his name was, but when he was asked if the president, like, what if the president officially orders an assassination, he basically said, well, that'd be illegal with no explanation or justification. Like, motherfucker, the text of the ruling makes that legal. The tier of commentary that the liberal bourgeoisie, the, like, capital class liberals are engaging in is so goddamn illiterate and dismissive that it like literally it goes into malicious territory. And that's not an accident because, you know, they're part of the capital class, and we know that the capital class loves fascism, or if nothing else, they love ceding ground to fascism, because fascism is a reaction, a political reaction to advancing progressivism in society, and you know, changing socioeconomic landscape that is actually quite convenient for protecting the interests of private capital. You know, basically they're like, it's like a contest between the left and the right, and when given the option, the liberals choose the right most of the time, because the left actually wants to threaten the power base that liberals draw from, that being liberal institutions and capital, like private capital, you know. That shortcut is great. I love it. Bro, what the fuck? I got bumped as hell. Bro, it's him. The homie in the flesh. Oh yeah, as also I saw a Rolling Stone article that pertains to what I was talking about with the sort of liberal reaction to this and how underwhelming it was. There was the Rolling Stone article said that apparently, like, Biden, which I guess he speaks for the Democratic Party in this sense, expressly ruled out reforming the Supreme Court, which only confirms everything that I've said about liberals deferring to institutional authority above everything else that they do, right? Editing Y2K, be sure to link that in the description. But, like, the liberals were always going to lose this fight. I guess this is kind of where I go to my ending thoughts here. Like, whatever happens, I think we're now realizing these are the sunset days of the Weimar Republic, or whatever the analog for that is in America, right? The groundwork for a legalistic, which means within the bounds of the institutions, fascist coup has been laid, and it's been being laid for the past 40 years by the Republican Party, ever since they, I don't know, ever since like the Reagan and Bush administrations, like Bush Sr. Um, and the liberals just fucking gave up without a fight. Like, that's fundamentally, that's the reason that the fascists have basically already won, is because the liberals expressly resolved not to fight back. The whole "you go low, we go high" bullshit, that's specifically like they're saying, oh well, we will simply ignore your attacks on democracy and advancing social norms and workers' power and whatever, and queer people and minorities, and we'll simply say that that's very unpolite, uncivil, and work with you anyways. Right? Like, it literally, it's just like the strategy of, what if we gave the fascists everything that they wanted while pretending that we're somehow morally better than them for allowing them to win? Like, fucking, like, yeah, great, genius. You'll get to have that written on your tombstone when you're dead after you lose and the Republicans order you to be assassinated. Ah, I raced so well just to get 6th place. This is tight. These are tight races. But I want to stress something. Lest this come off as a doomering, which it is not. It is not, in fact, doomer to describe the set of political facts that we are now confronted with. Because I don't intend to do nothing about it. You see, I'm not a liberal, so I will not simply resign to doing nothing. In this respect, I can never be doomer, because to be doomer is to give up. Doomering is not when bad things happen. This wasn't an immediate, like, spur of the moment thing. I know a lot of people only started paying attention after January 6th, or in my case, I started getting, I started paying attention to politics back in 2016-17, about the time that Trump won the election the first time. But from the moment that the Clintonite Democrats took power in the 1990s, right? With all the fucking arrogance and outright disdain for like the American electorate and the democratic process and the media and whatever else, like for all of their complacency and neoliberal institutionalism and whatever, the country's fate was immediately sealed. Because that attitude, fundamentally, that is the attitude that the Democrats have carried with them into the 21st century. It's what lost them, like, so much ground in the 2000s. It's what allowed the Republican Party to just push further right with no resistance. It's what got Trump elected in 2016. And it's what's killing the country now. It's what's, like, stagnating the country as well. You know, obviously Republicans are at fault for this as well, but Republicans and Democrats share a lot of components of ideology. All the, like, economic policies that the Republicans have, those are neoliberal policies. And the only reason that the Democrats are better is because they are either less bad or, like, slightly deviating that from that recently, now that they've realized how unpopular it is. But it's, you know, it's too little too late. Like, the institutionalism, basically what I'm trying to say, kills countries. And especially like the democratic brand of institutionalism, because their institutionalism, like the Democratic Party's institutionalism, holds that liberal institutions are so sacred that they should never even be used. Like the phrase "do nothing Democrats" is really apt here, because like they don't use the bully pulpit, they don't do media messaging, they don't use the court system, like hardly ever, or they rely on it when it's the slowest method of doing anything. They like barely lift a finger even when things are guaranteed to succeed. You know, they won't like do any sort of political subterfuge or maneuvering in Congress for issues that have like so much public approval that it would make fucking tin pot dictators salivate, you know, over the prospect. Like the choice for America to fall to fascism was entirely made by the Democrats, even if they don't know it. I've said before that Republicans are basically like a wildfire. Fascists in America and broadly the world over are like a reactionary wildfire. They are spreading without control. They must be put out. But to get mad at the wildfire is actually almost like the wrong thing to be mad at. Because like it's a preventable phenomenon. It's possible to like do forestry maintenance and whatever to prevent that wildfire. But all the liberals have been doing is evenly spreading brush across the ground so that when the fire does happen, it faces no opposition. I'm still going to vote for the Democrats, don't get me wrong. Because voting is not like an exercise of moral virtue, right? Like there are some people who participate in the voting discourse and like openly make the argument that you shouldn't vote. You should vote because you'd be a fool not to. It's one of the only ways in which you have direct access to the levers of power, and you would be an idiot not to use it. But you should do it understanding that fundamentally it's not going to change anything. The best that voting can really do, and which is what I intend for it to do in the instances where I engage in it, is buy time. You know, electing a Democrat isn't going to fix anything, but it will buy time. How much time, I don't know, but you know, you have to use that time to advance the dialectic. Here we go. I'm a Marxist nerd, of course, so I have to use that term at least once per stream. You know, you use that time to do other stuff, but you should vote to buy that time for yourself, if that makes sense, right? Best item in the game. Let's go. No. Oh, actually, that could work out for me, I think. Oh, nice. Oh. But yes, back to my buying time argument. That's why I intend to vote. Uh, I think a lot of the voting discourse relies on a fundamentally wrong assumption that voting is somehow an expression of moral virtue. It is not. It is an exercise of power, and to abstain from voting is to be a liberal, and to decide to abstain from using what little power you have. Not very socialist of people, I must say. You know, it just the understanding, I think, that I am going to vote, but it's not going to fundamentally change the outcome. It's only the only thing it can do really is buy time, is the correct kind of the correct thing to settle on in that instance. Like I said, how much time I don't know. If Joe Biden is still the candidate, then January 2025 is when the fascist takeover happens, like properly. Or when it finally becomes realized, when this is no longer the Weimar Republic and it's now Nazi Germany. Like the bridge between those two happens in January 2025 if Biden remains the candidate, because he's going to lose. Or it could be later. If the candidate is somebody else, it could be later if the Democrats decide to replace him. But I don't want to dwell on that too much. What I would like to talk a little bit about, though, is like what I intend to use that limited time to do, right? Or rather, what it might be a good idea to do with that time. Because I've been thinking about, like, for the last several months, for actually a year or two, how do you get involved in politics in a way that doesn't directly pertain to or rely on electoralism, right? How do you get involved outside of the electoral process? Not on the campaign trail, not like phone banking to ask people to vote. Real involvement, you know? And I have, like, I'm not an expert or anything on like direct action, insofar as anybody can be an expert on direct action, like whatever that implies. But I've thought of a couple of things, right? Like things that it might be good to do. Number one, unionizing workplaces, right? That's a great way to build class consciousness and like worker power, because like it's it's very very obvious and all that. When I if slash when I get a job, I intend to basically, one of the first things I do will be like try to approach some of my coworkers to unionize or something, unless I'm like in management or whatever, and in that case they're not eligible for a union. Um, that's one thing. And then another thing that I've seen every now and again, but it almost like kind of slipped my mind because of how small it is. Some people post pictures on social media or wherever else of them putting like radical graffiti and stickers around town, which could be cool. Oh no, god damn it! I don't know why I decided to stop there. It just seemed like the right decision. I swear I was not stopping to troll. I genuinely thought that it would be a smart thing to do in order to not get hit. So yeah, leaving stickers around is something cute that I could do. Because people see those. I don't know how much of an impact it has. I would love to, like, I know I'm too data brained in this instance, but if there's any historical precedent to show that these like little radical pamphlets or stickers or graffiti or whatever impacts people's perception of things in any sort of way, where they see that and they're like, huh, cool, or like, I never thought about that. I would love to apply that. Um, and then going to town hall meetings as well is another obvious thing, and being annoying as fuck about affordable housing or whatever is on the docket. Because like I've said in other videos, I think, like, local politics are almost entirely determined by homeowner boomers and, Gen Xers, because they're the only people who can afford a home, unless you're a rich millennial. Uh, and their interest in seeing their property values go up. And like I say that as a generational thing. It's a class thing. It just happens to be that like wealthy people are older statistically than poor people. So that could be one thing I do, although that comes with a not insignificant risk of political reprisal in some way. That was scary. Oh, wow. Would you look at that? And I win. Nice. Uh, I've mentioned the stuff that I can do and intend to do, but ultimately, there's not much anybody like any individual person like. There's not much we can do aside from liberals that know that like liberals fucking suck. Just live with that knowledge and know that fascists are, reactionary force of nature, and it's part of a predictable historical pattern that liberals cede ground to fascists because they're both liberal capitalist ideologies. And, I'm sure you know the rest. I already talked about that. Um, yeah. Future me, cut the segment there. That was good. Hey guys, editing Y2K here. Just wanted to do a final addendum to the video segment, or rather this two-part video segment thing, so that it didn't feel entirely empty at the end there. I said that there's not much that any of us can do now that the groundwork for a legalistic fascist coup has been almost entirely laid. And that's true, but hold on. Don't yourself, put the rope down. That's you doing that would be exactly what fascists would love to happen. So don't do that. Don't. This is just how history progresses. This like what I described earlier as like historical, reliable historical patterns. It's not always fascism by name with this stuff, but there's a typical back and forth between material forces that favor hierarchy and material forces that favor egalitarianism. Basically, there are the "it's so joever" phases of history, and there are the "we're so Barack" phases of history. And we're watching a "it's so joever" phase taking place right now. Are things going to get worse? Are things going to be worse? Is life going to be worse? Yes, unquestionably. Anybody who tells you otherwise is lying to your face, and they do not like you. Because fascists hate you, and so do liberals. You see, the fascists and liberals will tell you things will not get worse because they hate you. But like I said, you should live in spite of them, and because life is still worth living anyways, even in the "it's so jover" parts of history. And one other thing that I realized as well, as I was getting ready to do this, I didn't really address the Supreme Court as an institution, partly because I did that in part one, the first part of this video segment thing. But I'll do so again to end things off. The Supreme Court and Marbury versus Madison were fucking mistakes. They need to be abolished. We already have federal courts that do the same thing as the Supreme Court, and the court system in general needs to be massively overhauled so that judges aren't appointed for life. Especially in the case of the Supreme Court, they're appointed for life with no ethical guardrails or bounds or rules. Like, seriously, that's a real thing. So, that's pretty bad, I think. The Supreme Court as an institution, pretty cringe. Also pretty cringe that liberals won't even acknowledge that. But yeah, that's all I got. And thank you for watching, and I'll see you next time.